At 4 in the morning, I was woken up by a call from my boyfriend.
Emily, are you awake? My mom wants you to come over early to help.
I squinted at my phone. It was 4 in the morning. Who asks for help at this hour, especially when it's my first time meeting David's parents? Reluctantly, I got out of my bed and headed to David's house. Half an hour later, I arrived at David's place in my Lamborghini. He was already in the kitchen helping Mrs. Smith make dumplings.
Mom, Dad, this is Emily.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Sorry to make you come over so early. Michael is bringing his girlfriend over later, and I can't manage everything on my own, so I needed your help.
I knew Michael was bringing his girlfriend home today, but the difference in treatment between the two future daughters-in-law was stark. By 7, we finally finished preparing a table full of dishes.
You've worked hard, baby. Just focus on enjoying the meal later. I'll handle the cleanup.
He led me to the sofa to rest, but just as I was about to sit down, Mrs. Smith stopped me.
Don't sit.
She handed me a piece of cardboard.
Use this to sit on, so you don't dirty our sofa.
Holding the cardboard, I was confused. I wasn't in any condition that could dirty the sofa, and my clothes were freshly changed. How could I dirty the sofa?
Sweetheart, it's just a family rule. New daughters-in-law have to do this when they meet the parents. Please bear with it.
At that moment, David's father woke up.
You must be Emily. David has mentioned you before.
I couldn't help but shiver. His gaze felt somewhat unsettling. David had told me that his father was a retired official, always upright and principled, while his mother fussed over trivial matters. Hence, David respected his father more.
Hello, sir.
Mr. Smith nodded in satisfaction. I found a moment alone to pull David into the bathroom and started complaining.
Now I understand what kind of person your mother is. She treats me like this even before I'm officially part of the family. Will it be worse after I marry in?
It won't be. My mom has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Didn't you notice she didn't let you do the heavy work while cooking?
I began to feel a bit emotional. David and I had only known each other for 3 months. I had just broken up with my ex-boyfriend and needed someone new to help me move on from that difficult time. That's when David appeared. I didn't tell David about my family's background, only that I was working at a coffee shop. My previous boyfriend had been with me for my family's money, leaving me with some emotional scars. But in the few months I'd been with David, I felt he wasn't with me for my money. I planned to tell him everything after meeting his parents.
Sweetheart, once we get married, let's move to Sonia, okay?
His gentle voice pulled me back to reality.
Okay. I've seen enough of mothers-in-law making things difficult for their future daughters-in-law. As long as I endure this period, things will eventually calm down.
We lingered in the bathroom for a while longer. Around 9, David's brother Michael arrived with his girlfriend. Michael made quite a commotion as soon as he walked in.
Mom, is dinner ready? Jessica and I are starving. You have no idea how tiring the journey was.
David hurried out to attend to the little prince. Michael had his arm around his girlfriend's shoulder. She was petite and cute, but her makeup made her look like she was in her 30s.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I'm Jessica. These are gifts from my parents for you. Please accept them.
She had already outdone me in the gift-giving department. I had also brought a gift, a school district apartment in Bay. The apartment was a gift from a developer to Mr. Johnson, who thought he didn't need it and passed it on to me. David's parents accepted the gifts with smiles. Suddenly, Jessica turned her gaze to me.
You must be the sister-in-law? You're even prettier than in the photos, but your hairstyle is a bit outdated, like something from the 80s or 90s.
Starting with personal attacks so soon? Can't we just get along?
Right, Emily, don't just stand there. Come help me serve the rice.
At the dinner table, Jessica kept flaunting her gold necklace and bracelet. But the gold necklace seemed to be peeling. I didn't want to expose her. Young people, it's normal to be a bit vain.
Jessica, I heard your family is in the real estate business?
Jessica couldn't miss such a good opportunity to boast.
Yes, my dad is the chairman of Jeonbei Group.
I had just taken a sip of soup and couldn't help but spit it out when I heard that.
Sorry about that. The chairman of Jeonbei Group is named Jiang Qing, right?
I handed her a couple of tissues.
Are you silly? How could you burn yourself with soup? The chairman of Jeonbei Group is named Jiang Qing. My dad doesn't share your surname, does he?
Well, your dad actually does share my surname. Jiang Cheng, the chairman of Jeonbei Group, is my biological father. I'm not so foolish as to forget my own father's name. She even changed my dad's surname. The table was finally set with a sumptuous spread by 7.
Massaging Emily's shoulders, you've worked hard, baby. Just focus on enjoying the meal later, I'll handle the cleanup.
He led Emily to the sofa to rest, but just as she was about to sit down, Mrs. Smith intervened.
Don't sit.
She handed Emily a piece of cardboard.
Use this to sit on, so you don't dirty our sofa.
I glanced at Mrs. Smith, who seemed quite pleased with her arrangement.
Take this and study it well when you get home.
David, seeing this, snatched the childbirth manual from my hand and threw it into the trash. Mrs. Smith's face twisted in displeasure as she retrieved the manual and handed it back to me. Calmly, I took out a set of house keys from my bag.
I almost forgot to give you a gift. This is a house in the northern part of the city, in a prime location. It's a gift for you and Mr. Smith. I hope you like it.
Jessica's previously smug expression froze. The gift she brought probably couldn't even buy a square meter of the house. The house I gifted costs $30,000 per square meter.
Mom! Now we have a house, and Jessica and I can live there after we get married.
Jessica, fuming, grabbed her bag and stormed out. Mrs. Smith seemed to want to stop her but hesitated. She turned and pushed me out the door.
It's all your fault. You made my second daughter-in-law angry before she even entered our house. Get out!
I was a bit puzzled. Mrs. Smith's attitude towards me was quite obvious. But this was our first meeting, how could there be such animosity? On the way home, I suggested to David that we break up.
Look, your mom clearly doesn't like me. Marrying you would only make her angry. Let's break up.
To my surprise, David suddenly braked at the highway exit, causing me to lurch forward.
What nonsense are you talking about? I won't allow you to say the word breakup.
His sudden action startled me.
What are you doing?
I love you. It has nothing to do with my parents.
At that moment, I still believed he loved me, but what happened next left me bewildered. As usual, I was working at the coffee shop.
Why don't you quit this job?
I said I wanted to experience life. The coffee shop was located downstairs from David's company, and he started coming to buy coffee more frequently. Gradually, his colleagues also learned about our relationship.
I heard from David that you two have already met each other's parents. When are you planning to get married? That way, we can prepare in advance.
David hesitated, but just then, he received a phone call.
Hello?
David, your dad has fainted. You need to come home right away. Oh, and don't forget to bring your girlfriend.
Upon hearing this, David hurriedly took me home. When we arrived, his dad was not in distress. Instead, a pregnant woman was sitting in the living room. David's expression changed completely when he saw her.
John,
She appeared to be about 5 or 6 months pregnant.
Mom, didn't you say Dad had fainted? Where is he?
Your dad is downstairs playing mahjong. Now, explain to me what's going on here.
David was speechless. Mrs. Smith glanced at me, then sat back on the sofa with her arms crossed.
Come on, explain to me whose child she is carrying.
What child? I don't even know her.
Indeed, people tend to stutter when extremely nervous. David had a child behind my back. David cheated on me? In just a few seconds, countless thoughts flashed through my mind. Actually, I didn't mean to break you and David up. Let's do this. Whoever can have a son first will be accepted into our family as the daughter-in-law. It was as if she was giving me a way out. Seeing that I didn't respond, she continued.
Men make mistakes sometimes. As women, we need to be more forgiving.
Is this a normal way of thinking? I looked at David, hoping to hear the truth from him.
Emily, it was just a mistake I made at the time.
A mistake? So, it confirms that it was indeed a mistake?
Sister, please let me and John be together. You don't want the baby to be born without a father, do you?
How did this become my fault? There were many suspicious points about this situation. It seemed like Mrs. Smith had deliberately tricked me into coming here to put on this show. I quit my job at the coffee shop and went back home. David called and texted me almost every day. I simply removed my SIM card. Back home, my brothers all knew about the situation and threatened to avenge me. The next time I saw David was at the mall. He had some bruises on his face and his clothes were disheveled. Instinctively, I wanted to avoid him, but he stepped in front of me.
Give me a minute to explain. The child that woman is carrying isn't mine, it's Michael's. My mom didn't want Michael's girlfriend to break up with him, so she put all the blame on me.
I frowned. That did sound like something his mom would do. So what if it's true or not? There's no future for us. I turned to leave, but the next second, I was pulled into a warm embrace.
Believe me, I've been looking for you these past few days. I went to the coffee shop, the office, but you were nowhere to be found. I'm sorry, sweetheart.
Maybe I should try to forgive him?
My mom has always favored Michael. She doesn't like me because she almost lost her life giving birth to me. Over the years, I've always been inferior to Michael, whether in work or studies, until I met you. My mom always blames me for all the bad things Michael does, which is why I respect my dad so much. My dad is the only one, besides you, who cares about me.
Listening to this, I felt a strange sense of empathy. I was pampered like a princess growing up, never lacking love in my family. But hearing this made me inexplicably sad. In the end, I gave in. I turned around, hugged him, and patted his back. Don't worry, I'll always love you. 3 days later, David told me that Michael had already resolved the situation with the pregnant woman. Perhaps he gave her some money to leave. David also mentioned that his dad had booked a private room tonight for Michael to apologize to me. When I arrived at the private room, the first thing I noticed wasn't Michael, but the woman sitting next to him, Mrs. Smith. She looked exhausted, with a bandage on her head and several needle marks around her mouth. It seemed like she had been through a lot. I couldn't help but swallow nervously.
Mrs. Smith, what happened to you?
She opened her mouth slightly but couldn't speak.
My mom was scratched by a cat while walking downstairs a few days ago and also bumped her forehead.
This explanation seemed to match the scratches on her mouth, but I distinctly remembered that David's family didn't have a cat.
Sister-in-law, I'm really sorry. It was my fault that caused a rift between you and Robert. I'll drink this as an apology.
With that, he downed the glass.
Sister-in-law, I'm sorry. That woman was really troublesome, but we've given her some money and she's gone now.
What? Jessica knew about Michael's affair and still stayed with him?
You don't mind?
Jessica's face froze for a moment.
I don't care. Michael treats me well, buys me things, and besides, I'm carrying his child now. We're not going to break up easily.
Mr. Smith invited us all to sit down, saying that Michael had already set a wedding date and that David and I should also prepare. But I saw a different look in Mrs. Smith's eyes. That look might have been regret, or perhaps a sense of injustice. Was she hoping I could help her? Narrator, tone, serious. Back home, I took out the discarded fertility guide from the trash. Musk, blackwood flower, purple eggplant flower, these are all preventive herbs. Why would she give me these things? To harm me? Would harming me benefit her? Narrator, tone, serious. I soon found out the answer. Narrator, tone, serious. As the date of my engagement to David approached, his father initially suggested we get married directly, but my father insisted on an engagement first for the sake of ceremony. Narrator, tone, serious. After meeting each other's parents, David and I began inviting people to the engagement ceremony. It was then they realized I was the heiress of the Jiangbei group, and Jessica was an imposter. However, Jessica still didn't break up with Michael. They quickly got married and moved out. It seemed Michael was in a hurry to get married. Narrator, tone, serious. One day, we went to a bridal shop to choose outfits, and only David's father came along.
Emily, tone, curious. Where's Aunt Linda?
Mr. Smith, tone, friendly. She went to play cards with the neighbor. I'll take the clothes back to her. Come on, Emily, try this dress.
Narrator, tone, serious. He picked out a deep V evening gown for me. I had never worn such a dress, but his father kept insisting I try it on.
David, tone, persuasive. Sweetheart, just try it. My dad has a good eye, you'll look stunning in this dress.
Emily, tone, shy, but I've never worn anything like this before. I'm not comfortable with it.
Narrator, tone, serious. Unable to resist David's gentle persuasion, I put on the evening gown. When I came out, his father's eyes lit up. This made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to upset him by changing out of it. Narrator, tone, relieved. Fortunately, my father and Robert arrived just in time to save the day.
Robert, tone, serious. Why are you wearing such a dress? It's too cold for this weather. Change into something else.
Narrator, tone, relieved. My father nodded in agreement.
Mr. Smith, tone, apologetic. It's my fault for not considering everything. I'm really sorry, in-laws.
Narrator, tone, serious. My father waved it off, indicating it was fine, but reminded me to dress warmly in the future. We had just ordered our evening gowns and were about to pay when I received a phone call. Feeling puzzled, I answered, "Hello."
Hi, are you a relative of Grace? The patient was involved in an accident on Route 23. Please come to the hospital immediately.
Grace? The name sounded familiar. David noticed my unusual expression and quickly asked what was wrong.
What's wrong?
I told him everything, but his face turned grim.
It's my mom. I'm going to the hospital.
I was confused. Why was I the one being contacted about his mother's accident? We reached the hospital in just 10 minutes. Throughout the night, Mr. Smith never showed up, and David had to leave for work, leaving me as the only one by Mrs. Smith's side. I couldn't help but wonder what this woman had done to deserve such neglect. The police said Aunt Linda had fainted while buying groceries and was almost hit by a delivery guy. I stayed by the hospital bed, staring out at the dark, stormy sky, with heavy rain pouring down and thunder rumbling. Suddenly, the TV switched to a news channel.
We interrupt this program with breaking news. On the afternoon of June 25th, a headless female body was found in the outskirts of our city. The body has been sent to the Forensic Center for identification.
The woman's clothes and her swollen belly looked so familiar. My mind went blank.
How could it be the pregnant woman from a few days ago? Michael said he had given her money to leave. Why was she found in the outskirts, and in such a state? Suddenly, someone tapped my shoulder.
I turned around stiffly. Ah!
A cunning face appeared before me, startling me.
Oh, it's just you.
I quickly stood up and offered him my seat. Sorry, Uncle. I was just startled. I have something to attend to, so I'll leave now. I'll come back to see Aunt Linda tomorrow. I hurriedly put on my coat and left in a rush, catching a cab to escape. When I arrived at the hospital the next day, Aunt Linda was already awake. She wanted some water, but no one was there to help her. I quickly put down my meal and helped her drink some water.
The moment she tasted the water, she knocked the cup over. The sound of the cup breaking was loud, attracting the attention of the doctor.
Aunt Linda's throat had been stitched up and the stitches were just removed yesterday. She can only be fed with nutritional fluids and can't drink water.
Stitched? By whom? This is a serious matter and should be reported.
This is a family matter. We have no right to intervene. Just don't give her water, or she might never speak again.
How can you say that?
The doctor didn't give me a chance to finish and walked away with the medical records. I returned to Aunt Linda's bedside. Tears welled up in her eyes, a mix of pain and numbness.
Aunt Linda, is there something you want to tell me?
To my surprise, Aunt Linda nodded, but she couldn't speak and could only make muffled sounds.
Who did this to you? Do I know them?
Aunt Linda nodded again. Someone familiar? Who could it be? Aunt Linda slowly raised her head and pointed towards the door. I looked in the direction she pointed, and that cunning face appeared before me again. My mind went blank for a moment.
Uncle, I didn't know you were here until Aunt Linda told me.
David's father, Mr. Smith, stood at the door holding a basket of fruit, with an elderly woman beside him.
Mom, this is Emily, David's fiancée. Look how considerate she is.
The elderly woman behind him showed no expression and said nothing.
Hello.
My mom lost her voice years ago and can't speak. Don't mind her.
Grandma walked up to me, gave me a sharp look, and then went to take care of Aunt Linda. Grandma wiped Aunt Linda's face and then left. But Aunt Linda seemed even more inclined to cry. From her eyes, I could see regret.
Hi, such a look of utter despair.
Aunt Linda, if you can't say it, could you write it down? I took out some paper from my bag and handed it to her. She hesitated for a long time before writing a single sentence.
I want to eat Little Red Riding Hood's fried skewers, the one in Hebei.
Why specifically mention the one in Hebei? There are many Little Red Riding Hood fried skewer shops here, so why the one in Hebei? And with her throat in this condition, she couldn't eat anything at all. There must be some hidden meaning. So I searched and found that there was only one Little Red Riding Hood fried skewer shop in Hebei, and it had closed down 20 years ago. I immediately packed my things and set off for Hebei. When David found out I was leaving, he asked where I was going, but I didn't tell him the truth.
Where are you off to?
Just taking a break with my girlfriends. A day later, I arrived at the fried skewer shop. The shop was dilapidated and in disrepair. After some investigation, I learned that the shop owner had lost his daughter years ago and couldn't keep the shop running. He had been searching for his daughter ever since. Through persistent inquiries, I finally found out the current address of the shop owner. Before knocking on the door, I felt a bit ridiculous. Was it too absurd to come all this way just because of one sentence from Aunt Linda? Especially considering how poorly she had treated me before. But something inside me kept pushing me. After much deliberation, I knocked on the door without hesitation. 3 minutes later, the door opened. An elderly man with white hair came out.
Who are you looking for?
Do you know Grace? The old man's drooping eyelids suddenly lifted.
My daughter. Have you seen my daughter? Do you know her?
I later learned that Grace was their lost daughter. She had been abducted at the age of 25 and had been missing ever since. Perhaps Mrs. Smith had been trafficked. I silently vowed to seek justice for Aunt Linda. So I took the old man to the county town and arranged the best accommodation for him. I had to arrange a secret meeting between them. I feared that David and Mr. Smith might do something even more drastic. Half a month later, Aunt Linda was discharged from the hospital. I arranged for her to meet Grace. Things didn't go as I had expected. David appeared behind me at some point.
Why did you bring my grandpa here?
I was startled. Grandpa?
Yes, this is my grandpa. Why did you bring him here? I was planning to take my mom back to the countryside once she felt better.
I was even more shocked. Could this all have been a setup by David? Maybe I was overthinking it. Aunt Linda might have just been playing a trick on me. I quickly changed my tone. Aunt Linda said she wanted to see Dad. I'm sorry I didn't explain it to you first. It's good they met. My dad invited us for dinner. Do you want to go?
Of course.
On the way to my house, I sat in the passenger seat, staring at David. Do you love me? I suddenly asked.
Yes. I've told you before, you're my only one. You saved me when I was at my lowest. I'll be with you for life.
Then let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Did you or your dad see your mom's throat? He fell silent, his eyes momentarily turning vicious.
Does it matter? It's a family tradition. Not just my mom, my grandma too. Don't worry, if you marry me, I won't let that happen to you.
The baptism of feudal customs. The first time I visited his home, his mom handed me a piece of cardboard, then made things difficult for me, praising one while belittling another, and then orchestrated a scene with a pregnant woman. Was all of this intentional? Was Mrs. Smith doing all this just to drive me away? These were just my suspicions. I didn't dare take any real action. If all of this was false, how would I face David in the future? That night, I returned to David's house to take care of Mrs. Smith. While David was taking a shower, a QQ email notification popped up on his phone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it.
The video was disturbing. A woman was shouting angrily in the rain. Lightning struck, and I recognized her face. It was the pregnant woman. The video was too graphic, so I skipped to the end. The last face that appeared almost scared me to death. It was Michael.
Brother, you'll love this video. I've taken care of her for you. Now you and your wife can live happily.
I transferred the video and chat records to my phone. Just then, David emerged from the shower. Another message popped up on his phone.
Why haven't you replied?
Did you look at my phone?
Why are you so stingy? I just used it to pay for my shopping cart. Do you really need to be so upset? I'll pay you back.
All right, just let me know next time you look at my phone. There are company secrets in there.
At that moment, Mr. Johnson called, asking me to come home. Perfect timing, my dad was my savior. After explaining the situation to David, he let me go. Before leaving, my palms were still sweating.
I'll come back to see Aunt Linda tomorrow. You'll have to manage on your own tonight.
Okay.
Outside, the wind howled, and the rain poured down heavily. The water was so deep that my car could barely move. I didn't go home, I was heading to the police station. I had evidence of David's crime, and I had to seek justice.
I drove fast, but halfway there, a black G-Wagon blocked my path. I knew it well, it was David's car. I quickly turned around to flee, but the next second, he rammed straight into my car. He got out, furiously trying to open my car door. I quickly locked it and took out my phone to call my dad. My hands were shaking so badly from fear that I fumbled with the buttons. Before the call connected, he smashed the window with a hammer.
What are you doing here?
I want to go home. Let me go. You're committing a crime now. It's not too late to turn yourself in.
The sound of the rain almost drowned out my voice. David turned and slapped me.
I trusted you and loved you, and you betrayed me. You forced my hand.
He shoved me into his car and took me back to his house, locking me in the basement. The basement was filled with various toys. I trembled, staring at David.
David, I've been telling you to let me have a turn with your girlfriend. What made you change your mind this time?
Dad, you're joking. My woman is yours too. Once you're done with this one, I'll find you another.
With that, David left the basement, leaving me alone with Mr. Smith. Even if I were foolish, I would know what was about to happen. Mr. Smith approached me step by step, grabbing my foot and pulling me towards him.
I've never had a rich girl before. You're so pretty, but too suspicious. If you serve me well, I might let you off easy.
I'm your son's girlfriend. You can't do this to me. My father won't let you get away with it.
My son's girlfriend? Do you know how many girlfriends he's had? I've had my way with every single one of them, including you and Jessica. And Grace, that wretched woman, wanted to save you? Impossible. She tried to help you, so I sewed her mouth shut. She'll never speak again.
It seemed all my suspicions were correct, entirely accurate. Aunt Linda had treated me that way because she wanted me to break up and leave their family. She was trying to help me, but I thought she was harming me. I should have realized it sooner. Those fertility secrets and everything else, I should have understood. I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable humiliation and end. But in the next second, I heard a thud.
Run.
Though her voice hadn't fully recovered, I could understand her words. Summoning all my strength, I pushed the old man away. Just as he was about to catch up, Aunt Linda quickly locked the door behind us. We ran all the way to the police station, and soon after, Mr. Johnson also arrived. I knew my support had arrived, and then I fainted. When I woke up in the hospital, 3 days had passed. During those 3 days, I had a high fever that wouldn't go down. Mr. Johnson told me that David and Michael had been detained. Aunt Linda was also rescued. I later learned that it was Aunt Linda who had knocked David out to save me. I visited David once before his final sentence was carried out. I asked him, "Do you regret it?" David was silent for a moment before slowly saying,
"No, I don't. I did love you."
I choked up a bit. "Why did you do this? Why did you make me misunderstand your mother? Do you know how hard it is for a mother?" David stared at me.
"I had no choice. He used to hit my mom, and gradually, I developed similar tendencies. I really had no choice."
Shouldn't all of this have ended long ago? The news reported all the crimes of David and Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith had harmed many people but had spared Mrs. Smith. He said he only loved Mrs. Smith. Love? Is it that profound? I couldn't think of any answers. Aunt Linda and her father returned to the countryside to spend the rest of their lives. Jessica couldn't escape the nightmare either. I only knew that she was tormented beyond recognition. Mr. Johnson told me she had lost half of her uterus. She said she was just vain and never expected to fall into a deeper trap because of it. Michael's methods were no less cruel than his brother's. In the days that followed, I never married, nor did I have children. I no longer believed in love. I should have stopped believing long ago. When my ex-boyfriend got together with my best friend, I should have stopped believing in love. After learning about this, my ex-boyfriend showed concern.
After we broke up, I hoped you would have a better life. I'm sorry for everything you've been through. If I were with you now, I would never let such things happen to you.
I smiled bitterly. Is there any point in saying this now? From the moment you betrayed me, it was all destined. I hope you have a happy life and take good care of your wife. This memory will follow me for the rest of my life, and I will never be able to let it go.